the Sympathetic Box. The dust in the thrift store tasted like forgotten stories. Carl felt it on his tongue, a fine grit of moth-eaten wool and yellowed paper. He ran a hand over his short-cropped hair, a nervous habit, as his eyes scanned the shelves, mountains of chipped porcelain and tarnished silver. Every weekend was the same beautiful ritual. He and Loren, adrift in a sea of other people's cast-off lives, hunting for the one oddity that called to them. It was their church, this cluttered sanctuary of the second hand. Loren was weaker today. She leaned against a tall, unsteady stack of furniture, her breathing a soft, shallow counterpoint to the tired drone of the overhead fluorescent lights. The illness had come on like a thief, slow and silent at first, then greedy, a persistent fatigue, a paleness that clung to her skin like morning mist, a cough that had deepened from a nuisance into a rattling, wet punctuation mark to her every sentence. The doctors spoke in hushed, somber tones, using words like aggressive and unresponsive. They had given her a year. It had been 6 months. Carl felt every tick of that clock like a physical blow. His gaze fell upon it then. Tucked behind a gaudy lava lamp and a stack of warped vinyl records, there was a box. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox, crafted from a wood so dark it seemed to drink the light around it. There was no latch, no lock, just a perfectly fitted lid. He picked it up. It was heavy, solid. His fingers traced the carvings on its surface. They weren't patterns, he realized, but words. Tiny, archaic letters spiraling across the wood in a language that was almost familiar, but remained just beyond the grasp of his understanding. He brought it to Loren, a strange peace offering against the siege of her sickness. Her eyes, which had seemed so dull, sparked with a familiar flicker of curiosity. Together, they took it home, the $2 price tag still stuck to its bottom. A comically mundane detail on an object that felt anything but. Back in their small, clean apartment, the sound of Loren's coughing fit echoed from the bathroom, a volley of sharp, tearing sounds that made Carl's chest tighten in sympathy. He sat at the kitchen table, the box before him. He'd finally managed to pry the lid open. A soft puff of air, smelling of dried herbs and ozone, escaped. Inside, the box was divided into 2 identical, velvet-lined compartments. The velvet was a deep, unsettling red, the color of old blood. It was the carvings inside the lid that held his attention now. They were in plain English, a stark contrast to the arcane script on the outside. The script was elegant, precise, and utterly insane. It spoke of sympathy, of burdens shared. It described a ritual, simple and terrifying. A biological token, a lock of hair, a drop of blood, from 2 individuals placed one in each compartment. A shared focus, a transference. It promised that one could draw the affliction of the other into themselves, a willing vessel for another's pain. It was the stuff of fairy tales, of Gothic romance. It was nonsense. But as another wave of hacking coughs tore from the bathroom, a desperate, terrible hope began to sprout in the barren soil of his heart. He presented the idea to her as a joke, a dark, fanciful what-if. But the look in her eyes stopped his laughter cold. It wasn't dismissive. It was hungry. She was the one who snipped a lock of her own lank, sweat-dampened hair. She was the one who guided his hand as he took a pair of nail scissors and cut a small piece of his own. Their hands trembled as they placed the tokens in the velvet compartments. When he closed the lid, the silence in the room changed. It became heavy, thick with a strange, subaudible vibration that seemed to press in on his ears. It wasn't a sound he could properly hear, but rather one he could feel in his teeth, in the marrow of his bones. He looked at Loren. A bead of sweat traced a path down her pale temple. Her eyes were locked on his, wide with something he mistook for fear, for hope. For the first few days, it was subtle. He'd wake up feeling a profound weariness, the kind that settled deep in your joints, while Loren would mention she'd slept through the night for the first time in months. He'd feel a fleeting nausea, a phantom ache in his lungs, and she would eat a full meal, the color returning to her cheeks in a faint, healthy blush. The transference was a tide, slowly ebbing from her and flowing into him. He welcomed it. Each pang of pain in his own body was a confirmation of her relief. It was a sacrament. He was saving her. The love he felt was so vast, so blinding, it left no room for questions. The sickness, when it took root in him, was crueler than he could have imagined. It was a ravenous fire in his lungs, a liquid weakness in his limbs. His own coughs began, deeper and more violent than hers had ever been. He saw the concern in her eyes, the tears she shed as she held his hand, and it fueled him. He was her knight, her martyr. He was taking the dragon's fire for her. The final weeks were a blur of pain, of whispered reassurances from Loren, of the box sitting on their bedside table, a silent, dark witness. He grew thin, his skin taking on the sallow, waxy sheen of death. He was so weak he could no longer lift the lid of the box himself. Loren had to do it for him, her touch gentle, her expression a mask of profound sorrow. The end came on a Tuesday. The world dissolved into a pinpoint of agonizing pressure in his chest, the sound of his own heart struggling like a dying bird. His last sight was of Loren's face, her eyes clear and bright, watching him. He felt a final, crushing wave of pain, and then a profound and sudden silence. He had done it. He had saved her. Loren waited a full, silent minute after his breathing stopped. The only sound in the room was the gentle drip of a faucet in the kitchen. She stood, her movements fluid and strong. There was no grief on her face, only a quiet, efficient resolve. She walked to the closet and pulled out a shoebox filled with paperwork. From it, she produced a life insurance policy. $1 million. The premium payments were all up to date. She had been so careful. She returned to the bed and looked down at Carl's still form. There was no pity in her gaze, only the cool, detached assessment of a project completed. She had been sick, yes. The poison she'd been taking in small, carefully measured doses for 6 months had been very real, its effects meticulously documented by a doctor she'd paid handsomely for his discretion. The plan had been flawless, a masterpiece of gaslighting and manipulation, all predicated on one simple, exploitable fact. Carl's love for her was absolute, unconditional, and profoundly stupid. Her gaze fell upon the sympathetic box, its dark wood cool and impassive. A tool. Nothing more. She picked it up, opened it, and removed the 2 locks of hair from their velvet beds. She flushed them down the toilet. Using a soft cloth, she meticulously wiped every inch of the box, erasing her fingerprints, erasing Carl's. It was just a box again. An anonymous, forgotten thing. 2 weeks later, the air was warm and salty. The sound of gentle waves kissing a sandy shore was a soft, rhythmic whisper. Loren sat on the balcony of a luxury hotel, a glass of expensive champagne sweating in her hand. The insurance money had cleared without a single question. She was free. She was rich. She was, for the first time in a long time, completely and utterly healthy. The memory of Carl was a faint, distant echo, as inconsequential as the $2 price tag she'd peeled from the bottom of the box before leaving their apartment for the last time. She had kept the box. It sat now on the passenger seat of her new convertible in the hotel parking lot. The next day, on her way to the airport, she would stop in another town, find another cluttered little thrift store, and leave it on a shelf. She'd even leave a $2 sticker on it, a little trap, baited and set, waiting for the next person whose love was stronger than their sense. Humanity clings to the belief that love is a shield, that sacrifice holds a sacred weight in the grand moral ledger of the universe. It is a lullaby sung to keep the shadows at bay. But the most chilling truth, the one that echoes in the deepest static, is that the darkness has no interest in balance. It only respects a winner. And the monsters are very, very patient.